Hello and welcome to Join Our Town. I'm your host, Tammy Jo Johnson. Join Our Town brings you the issues and problems that are faced in the local community with the hope of finding a solution. Our guest for this segment is Dr. Rick Reynolds, Senior Pastor for the Common Ground Destiny Center, and Michele Reynolds, CEO and founder for the Exit Program. They join us today to share important information regarding reentry assistance for sex offenders, along with the challenges that sex offenders face when reentering society. Thank you so much for being here with us today, guys.
Thank you, Tammy. We're happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
You're welcome. So let's see. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. We can start with you. You're the CEO and founder of the Exit Program.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Exit Program is an acronym. It stands for Ex-Offenders in Transition. And we started that program about 10 years ago in Franklin County. As a response to a need, we learned that sex offenders were actually being kicked out of the shelters, and because there were women and children being served there, and so it was kind of a struggle to be able to serve a sex offender in the same population where they may have had a crime against a woman or a child. So that was a red flag to us because we saw that as a public safety risk. Not only were people going to be put out in the streets and be homeless, but just the fact that they would be out on the streets and it's public safety, it just seemed like a big red flag. And so because we're property owners and compassionate about homelessness issues and helping people to get housed, we decided to open our doors to at least be compassionate enough to have someone stay in housing. And we started a program called the Exit Program, and today it's successful. So
awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Rick.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us a little bit about the Common Ground Destiny Community Center. Did I say it right?
Common Ground Destiny Center, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Tell me about that.
Absolutely. I'm a senior pastor and founder. The main vision really comes out of Titus 1:5, and we talk about being productive and understand that people have to learn the skills so that they would not live unproductive lives. And the way me and my wife collaborate with this is that from a holistic approach, we deal with that entity as it relates not just to sex offenders, but those who have missed the mark. Those not just, the world looks at it as crime, the church looks at it as sin. Either way, we got common ground, and so we can meet and talk about that. And so, as a pastor of that, we do believe we are underdog for the least, for the lost, and the abandoned. So, that's the flagship of our ministry.
Nice. Thank you so much for being here with us today, guys. I mean, the two together seem very powerful. The ministry behind the program.
Absolutely.
With the segment being about reentry assistance for sex offenders, tell us a little bit about what a sex offender is and how they're classified in the community.
So a sex offender is someone who commits a crime related to some type of sexual act. Here in Ohio, we distinguish them in tiers. We classify them as Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 offenders. Tier 1 being your lowest level offender, being a sexually oriented offender, Tier 2 being a habitual sex offender, and Tier 3 being a sexual predator.
Okay. And does the victim in each of those tiers matter as to how they're placed, or is it just, it sounds like it's just the amount of times one has been convicted?
Not necessarily the amount of times. It could be the level and significance of the offense. Also, it does become politicized based on where it happened, what municipality is adjudicating the offense. And so oftentimes, someone that may be a Tier 3 offender, which is a sexual predator, in one community may go to another community and actually be a step down as a Tier 2. So there's really kind of it's
unclear bias.
It's very unclear.
Absolutely.
It's very unclear.
And what are some of the challenges that they face re-entering into society? Now they've done their time. They've been convicted. They've done their time. Then what happens when they begin to re-enter into society?
Well, there are lots of barriers, not only for someone who enters society that's already been in prison or jail. Just the fact that they have a felony is a barrier in and of itself to return to a community that is not necessarily felon-friendly or able to forgive easily. So then coming out as a sex offender, not only do you have the stigmatization and the felony record, but you have barriers for housing, employment, and interpersonal relationships. If we're honest, nobody necessarily wants to live next to a sex offender. Nobody really wants them in their community. An employer may not want to take a risk of hiring them because it could affect their business. And then in terms of relationships, just the mistrust, and the fear around being involved with a sex offender. So there's lots of barriers, and most of the time, we as a community just kind of turn our head and we don't want to deal with it. We receive the cards in the mail because there are registration laws, and then we're incited because they're in the community. But the reality is that the average sex offender, which is a lower moderate risk offender, returns from prison every 2 to 3 years. So they do live in our communities today.
Wow. And you said it. You said that they have to register. So
They have to register.
Is that like a lot of reasons why a lot of them don't want to, as you know, because they want to keep it kind of a secret because of those challenges?
Yes, there are some sex offenders that do not have to register. Most of them do. So a juvenile sex offender, for instance, would not have registration requirements that involve public notification. Right. So even though there's registration, it's the public notification that causes more barriers. Okay. And then you may have some that were pre-Adam Walsh that do not have to, Adam Walsh Act, that do not have to register where there's a public notification. But for the most part, some have to register not only for life, others up to 10 years and things like that.
Okay. And you said it, and I want Dr. Rick to kind of elaborate on it. You said that the society or the community have a lack of forgiveness to even begin this process. Tell us about that.
Tammy, let me just share this with you. I want to just put a disclaimer out there. And the disclaimer is, when we think of sex offenders, the two questions goes through everyone's mind. The first one is, how could you do this? Mm. The second thing is what we're dealing with now, with the perception is, how can I forgive you for doing this?
That's right.
And so now the whole thing is really based at the end of the day is, can I forgive you? It's about forgiveness. Because in every society, you know this already, every community, they have an unforgivable sin. In the church, for example, the unforgivable sin is suicide. But in the world, the most unforgivable sin here is being a sex offender.
What about the fear of will they reoffend?
You know, that's a great question, Tammy. The truth of the matter is, and my wife kind of alluded to it earlier, is that the recidivism rate is extremely low for sex offenders, usually very low. But to answer your question is there a problem? Is there a challenge? Absolutely, there's a challenge, absolutely. But do I think we can address this issue? Absolutely. And I think the biggest problem we have in Tammy is, if I can just say this, is that it seems to be we're dealing with something after the fact versus preventive.
Right, right.
And so we got to deal with that. So thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you two, as a tag team, obviously, how do you support them in their reentry?
We do a number of things. For the most part, for the better part of a decade, we've been housing not only sex offenders, but actually we're a faith-based reentry program. So we house restored citizens, those that are coming home and they're homeless. So we consider ourselves a program that helps homeless people, and we do not preclude the sex offender.
Okay, so it's not like a sex offender housing.
No.
It's just that you don't leave them out.
No,
Absolutely.
we do not leave them out.
Absolutely.
We believe in being inclusive, and so we're not here to condone any man's sin. However, we are here to provide options, because to us, crime prevention is victim prevention. The scariest person in the world is not someone who committed a sex offense. The scariest person in the world is someone who doesn't have hope. And if we continue as a society to strip them of not only dignity, reputation, no housing, no employment, backs against the wall, what can you expect a person to do except go and reoffend? At least then they are able to have food, to have shelter, and to have their basic needs met. So we try to provide that on the outside to restore hope, to restore dignity. And most of the time we found that by housing that type of population, most of all, they're vulnerable, they're already broken, they've been discriminated against in the prison. They pretty much want to fade to black, they want to be invisible, they don't want to cause any problems. And so, but with just kind of negative attention around that, fear, a lot of times, you know, it's an impossible situation. Wow. So we just offer support.
I mean, you say it like it's no big deal, but that's a lot, because number one, you're kind of being the face of the forgiveness, because you're forgiving them, and so you're letting people see that they can have a second chance too.
That's correct.
So you do housing. Do you offer any type of counseling or supportive services?
Absolutely, and not only am I'm their pastor, but when they come actually to the program, I actually serve as a life coach.
Okay.
And so the life coach, I deal with the cognitive side of it, kind of with the thinking, where the thinking went wrong, and we believe, Tammy, that the first thing is we got to understand their foundation. Then we get to the attitude. Then we get to the activity. And then we become results driven. And then we can develop a lifestyle from there. So when they first come in, we got to get the foundation. Where were you thinking at? Where you went wrong at?
Right.
And usually it goes back to childhood usually. Probably,
than likely,
probably
yeah.
60% of them probably been molested at some point.
Right.
By somebody they know.
Right. So do you become then the voice for them, for the community in any kind of way?
We actually have done some public education and awareness around this issue. We collaborate with our local reentry coalition in Franklin County. Not only are we in Franklin County, we're now a statewide organization, so we actually serve this group of individuals in Columbus, Cincinnati, Akron, Mansfield, and Chillicothe.
Wow.
Because the need is so great. It's not just a need that's local, not just a need in the state of Ohio, but it's a national need.
Absolutely.
And so because a lot of folks don't do this work, we have been deemed as subject matter experts and have been called to the table to be able to talk about this and do some public awareness around this issue.
Now, number one, has that ever backfired? And then number two, do you have a success story that you can share as we begin to wrap up?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Just tell you one. First of all, let me just say that I know we got to wrap this up very quickly. I just want to be very clear that the disclaimer has to be that we have to have the courage to forgive. We have to have it, but we also have to let the people understand those who don't have the courage to forgive, to embrace, to love, to accept. And so to answer your question is, we have a number of wonderful stories, but the best story I can tell you is about a young man that came to the program about 5 years ago. Probably wasn't the most, probably was a level 2, if I remember correctly. To make a long story short, he came right from the gate saying, Pastor Rick, what do I need to do? Give me any job, it doesn't matter, because usually he can only get the low-wage jobs. Yeah. So eventually he got a job, got a car, got a house, and eventually got his family back.
Wow.
And so the point being is it that simple? No, it's not that simple. No. But my point being is, if they have the desire, the willingness, and if we give them the forgiveness, because they need the relationship, then I think they can do it.
Wow. So give us your contact information, and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay. So if you're interested in information on the EXIT program, you can visit our website, www.theexitprogram.com. And to reach Pastor and I, we're located at Common Ground Destiny Center Church. Our website is www.destinypartners.org. Nice. Or you can give us a call at 614-569-4958.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, guys.
You're welcome.
Coming up next on Joy in Our Town, juvenile reentry and recidivism. Stay with us. We'll be right back.